Best of r/malicious compliance episode 3. Where I come from, Australia. Each state has a volunteer emergency service. State emergency service. Think of a CERT, but bigger with better funding and does more things. One of our roles is in storm response, basically going around and conducting temporary repairs to structures to allow them to be lived in while more permanent repairs are arranged through insurance. Members of the public call up a number. A request for assistance is entered into the computer. The priority of the job is assessed and eventually a team of volunteers goes out to the job. Depending on the priority of the job, this can take time. We get all the priority 1 jobs first, then priority 2 etc. Following a large weather event we have a large number, something like 5,000, jobs pending. Part of the response are recon teams consisting of 2 volunteers going out to each job, assessing it on site and updating the request with further details and images. We were often working until 2,200 for low priority jobs, and were on 24-hour operations for the time. So, myself and another volunteer are driving to a job where a retaining wall has been damaged. This is far outside our operational capability. The other volunteer just happens to be the engineer who designed the wall. Small world. We arrive at the address and I phone the homeowner. Homeowner, who is this? Me. Good evening sir, my name is redacted from the state emergency service. Homeowner, I don't want whatever you're selling. Me. I am at your home regarding a request for assistance regarding your retaining wall. Homeowner, I don't care. F off. The phone call ends. I look at the other volunteer. Volunteer, well, he did say to F off. Me. Coffee? Volunteer, sure. We head off to grab a coffee. I phone the incident manager and tell him the report, word for word. The response is laughter and the go ahead to close job, with a note detailing the person's behavior. Found out from the engineer that when the council inspected it, the wall had moved enough to threaten the property above it. If we had inspected it that night, repairs made by council would have minimized the damage. Well, he did tell us to F off, so we did. Thank you. Next. Short story about your favorite Arkansas-based retailer, involving myself and a Karen worker. So I've been going to the same Walmart for about 5 years. The wife and I get groceries on Sunday, then I usually stop during the week for an energy drink / Pepsi and a snack for lunch. Wonderfully healthy I know. Well, after getting self-checkouts a few years ago, we now have a Karen who has replaced the smiley face sticker person and stops folks who don't use self-check to scan their receipt and a random item, as far as I can tell, to make sure they have paid. For reference, she stands about 10 feet directly in front of the self-check area, and always stops me after I use self-check, which is basically infuriating because 1, I never see anyone else get stopped from self-check. 2, she watches me wait and pay for my stuff. 3, I only ever have 2-3 items in one hand and a receipt in the other, no bag, so it's like Sherlock level logic to figure out what's going on. So I hatched a brilliant plan, to hand her my receipt, and keep walking. At first she looked confused, and I would say things like have a great day and smile while she's chasing me down with a receipt for $3.23 for a low-carb Monster and bag of chips, to which I would reply I don't need it and not take the receipt from her. This went on for about a good 2-month period until she realized if she did so much as acknowledge my existence, she would be left with a receipt to dispose of. As funny as this is, it gets better. Last Sunday, my wife and I got a bunch of stuff and went through a regular line at this Walmart. As we're getting close to the door, my wife, who has no idea of how I've been handing receipts to Karen, tries to hand this lady out receipt, to which she is ignored, like completely. Can't see you Harry Potter cape, ignored by Karen, and she's looking pretty confused. As soon as we hit the double door lobby, my wife says wow that's so strange, she always wants my receipt, to which I start laughing, probably too hard, and she figures out something is up. She regularly remarks on my ability to make friends wherever I go. On a positive note, she may not want to take me to Walmart tomorrow. Thank you. Next. First post here, on mobile. Obligatory sorry for formatting issues yada yada. Backstory to this is I was working in a family run restaurant. I was 17 and it was my first ever job. In the UK there are strict rules about how long under 18s can work without having a break and how long they can stay for in the evening. For this story we will focus on the break issues. In the UK, an under 18 at the time got a half-hour break for every 4 hours that was being worked. One weekend I was given a shift that started at 11 and finished at 15:30, so a 4.5-hour shift. I had mentioned to my supervisor that I was working a 4/1/2 hour shift, so if possible could I have my break earlier so that it made it easier. His response was, you only get your break once you've worked your 4 hours. Cue me agreeing, having my half an hour break at 15:00 and then promptly leaving after my break had finished, all the while a large group of around 25/30 people had arrived, leaving only one person working the floor. I didn't work there for much longer after that as I found a better job, but if I ever worked that shift pattern again I was always given my break a little earlier. Thanks for reading. Thank you. Next. I work as an administrative assistant at a major sporting goods retailer. Part of my job is to track attendance and regularly upload a report to corporate. My store manager just recently, in the last 2 years, got hired by our district manager who she has been friends with for years. They managed to push out the old store manager who had the store running like a ticking clock. Ever since then, it has become abundantly clear that she has no idea how to run the store, and we have all suffered for it. She constantly screws up the store schedule, bullies employees she doesn't like, and has hired and competed friends to management positions. We all dislike her and think she should be fired, but it seems like everything she does in the store makes us look bad while making her look good, until recently. Like I said above, part of my job is tracking attendance. Yet for years, it has been common knowledge that those in my position are expected to fail to upload attendance records to corporate because the company's policies on attendance are extremely harsh and many employees fail to meet attendance due to factors out of their control. For instance, employees who come in before we open to process our freight often clock in late because the managers on duty take their sweet time opening the front doors for these employees. It is not their fault that they come in late, and on some occasions, certain employees have been left outside for upwards of 30 minutes after ringing our doorbell because the only person who could open the doors was busy or didn't hear the doorbell, which is soft. Anyway, if I should upload the attendance record to corporate, many of these employees would probably be fired on the spot by our regional manager, through email, because these things are automated and mandatory. As a side note, the store manager is one of the managers who likes to take 10 or 15 minutes to open the door for freight employees. We all hate her for this because when it is winter we have to wait those 10 or 15 minutes outside the door in the freezing cold, and she acts like it is no big deal. Anyway, her district manager friend recently moved to another district and we got a new DM who is looking to move up in corporate. To do this, she has to make all of our metrics look awesome, including attendance. She sent an email to our store manager demanding an attendance record. I told the store manager that this could get many employees fired, but instead of realizing the implications, she told me to run the report anyway. I tried to tell her that this could result in most of the employees who had availability before we open, who are very valuable and rare, getting fired, and she completely blew me off. She literally went as far as saying that I was not thinking straight. I told her that she could adjust the attendance on her end as the DM clearly wanted her to do. This has been common procedure due to the reasons for poor attendance, and she told me that she was the store manager, she would figure it out, and I should just do my job as I was told. So I ran the report, and immediately got a furious email from the new district manager saying that I should have run the report by my store manager, to adjust the records, before uploading it to corporate. The next day, corporate sent an automated email with the names of all the employees that should be fired, which is not an email that our manager can either respond to or contest. She had to fire all the employees on the email, and as it turned out, every single employee with availability before we open got fired. 15 people. And every other employee in the store is a student with no ability to work before like 10 AM. So there is nobody to process our freight, which is a massive job. I got an email from a friend in corporate yesterday that said the regional manager was lining up our replacements for our store manager due to incompetence. None of us are surprised. Thank you. Next. We started instant issue debit/credit cards recently, probably 2 years ago, because we decided to join the 21st century and they worked great at our test location, so we decided to add them to all of our locations. The company we are using did a good job of setting everything up so every location has a printer and you can easily see what location you are using and change to the correct location. It's practically foolproof. Well, you know what they say, when the world creates something foolproof, the world creates a bigger fool. Despite the fact that there were large icons and notices saying which location they were printing to, the employees were printing to the wrong location, meaning that members were thinking they are about to get their debit and credit cards and it was going to a different branch. Sometimes the branch was 2 hours away. We sent out procedures to these people. We set up their defaults so that their branch matched their printer. They continued to print to the wrong one, so I decided to just remove the other branch printers from their logins. The only printer on each person's username was the one at their branch. This worked fine for about 5 months. That's when we hired a new branch manager at one of the branches. She was a loan officer at another branch and was moved. For some reason she really hated the fact that she didn't have access to her old branch to print cards as well as her new one, which made no sense to me. But she really wanted access, so I gave it to her. Who would think that would be enough? No, she wanted all of her people to have access to other printers. I tried to explain to her what was happening before, but she didn't care. She pitched a fit at everyone and I was made out to look like a bad guy for not giving her a simple request. So I finally relented and gave all her people access. You can guess what started happening. Yep, her people started printing to the wrong printers almost immediately. They just couldn't pay attention long enough to pick the correct one after changing to print to another branch for some reason. What's even worse is that her head teller 3 teams ordered supplies for her branch under another branch's printer. She was constantly down waiting on cards or a ribbon. She asked me to fix it, and I told her what I had done in the past and she was happy to let me remove the printers again. Thank you. Next. Years ago, I was working for a large organization. My boss was very nice and pleasant to work with at first. I was hired and tasked with taking a very troubled department and bringing it up in standards. My boss was fairly supportive during the initial few months on the job, but then, something changed. The department began to perform and improve greatly within the first 6 months, and this was recognized and heralded by upper management. This made my boss look good and also improved overall morale on the team within the troubled department, as they were finally recognized for their efforts and talents. About this time, 6-month mark, I was told to watch my back by a few other colleagues, both men and women, outside of my department, because my boss had a reputation for putting her own success over anyone else's. They also warned me that she was known for being very threatened by any successful males who worked with her. Male here. She was a very big champion of the women on her team and regularly promoted and advocated for them, but it seems that every male that worked on her team ended up leaving or getting fired. This was something I was not aware of when I was hired. I also am the only male on the team. After investigating this further, I found there to be some truth to all of this. As it happens, over a 12-year period, over 8 men on her team either quit or were fired. 6 fired and 2 quit. Of the women on her team during the same time period, 8 were promoted, 2 quit, 4 were still on her team and 0 were fired. So, I am a bit concerned about this now, as 1, I am a male, and 2, she has this reputation for making it difficult for men on her team. I just took this all in stride, however, and focused on continuing to manage the department to greater levels. Work on continuing to increase the morale of the department and ensuring I communicate with my boss regularly about any situation that would become problematic for her or me. I also focused on ensuring that she got maximum credit for the improvements of the troubled department and credited her with being a great boss that ensured that the department received the resources and support that it needed to succeed. Fast forward to about my 8th month there, and I am in a meeting with my boss and she begins to rage against me that I emailed someone who was in the upper management of the company. I explained to her that yes, I did CC that VP because the email in question was one that necessarily involved the entire area under which this particular VP led. She said I am not to do that and then proceeds to tell me that I am forbidden to email anyone that is above my pay grade, as that is not my place. She then tells me that only she is allowed to email these people and that if an email needs to go to them, CC or not, she will send it. I ask her if she would like me to send the emails that would need to go to VPs to her for her to send, and she tells me, Yes, send them to me and then I will send them. I ask her also if she wishes I do not call the VPs on the phone as well and she say, yes, you are not to call them either. Then she says, I know you may be used to getting your way because you are a man but this doesn't mean you can try to take my job. What? I'm kinda befuddled at this and just take it all in and decide that I need to respect her wishes because there must be something else going on here of which I am not aware. Okay, fine, we will do it your way. About a month goes by and during that time I only need to email a VP once and I write up the email to this VP's department, send it to her and then wait for her to send it on. Now this email is time sensitive and involves giving the VP and his people a heads up about resources needed for a particular project. Now the VP must be included in this email because this request involved budgetary issues and only the VP over a specific area is allowed to change or adapt their budget. Otherwise, I would have just communicated directly with the members of this other VP's team to give them the heads up. So I send the email to my boss, ask her to send it on within the next 3 days and then I wait. About a week goes by and I happen to run into this particular VP in the elevator. She asks me about the project, resources etc and I let her know that things are good. She then asks about the overrun on this one particular area and I tell her that it is best she ask my boss. She then asks me to send her an email on this particular overrun and I let her know. Sure, I will make that happen. I follow back to my boss, let her know about the conversation with the VP in the elevator and she blows up at me. Starts yelling and screaming and telling me that I am not to even talk with that VP or any VP about this project. I explained to her that sure, I get it but it would have been rude to not acknowledge this VP's question since we were stuck in the elevator together and I did not seek out that meeting. She then begins to tell me that she has to write me up for being insubordinate and not honoring her request to not email, call talk to VPs. I am floored but nothing I can do. As I am leaving her office, she tells me that I made a mistake in hiring you. Either you were different but you are just as entitled as all the other men I've hired. Damn. Okay, so this is going really well. Do I go to human resources and have them play their stupid games with me? Nah, not gonna solve anything especially with a boss that has been at the company for 10 years or so. Human resources generally cares very little about employees and only really worries about risk and protecting the company. They aren't gonna do shit for me so I don't report any of this. I seriously thought about filing a complaint about my boss comments to me. But, when I had the meeting where I had to sign my write-up, I decided against it given the HR officer had to read the write-up before I signed it and I figured that since the write-up was based on a BS policy that my boss created out of thin air, I was right in assuming that HR would do shit for me if I had complained anyway. So I just try to get through all this shit and start looking for another job on the side. 2 days later I get a call from an SVP, to whom the VP from the elevator reports to. Now my boss also reports to another VP. This VP is a female and also not the same one from the elevator. And this VP to whom my boss reports, also reports to this SVP. This SVP asks me to come to a meeting that next day. I explain that I am happy to do so but I will need to check with my boss first to ensure that there are no conflicts in the schedule. I also state to this SVP that I would appreciate it if she would contact my boss as well to ensure that my boss is made aware of her request. The SVP pauses and then tells me, no, that won't be necessary in this case, and then hangs up. Shit. So, I email my boss, tell her that the SVP is requesting to meet with me the next day and wanted to make her aware of the meeting. She comes storming into my office around 5:30 p.m. about an hour before I usually leave, and closes my door and berates me for a good 20 minutes for talking with the SVP. She was so loud that one of the members of the department in which I worked was about to call security just before my boss exited my office. I knew my boss would be mad but didn't expect anything like this. So, next day, I go to the meeting with the SVP. At that meeting is another 3 VPs. The first is the female VP whom I ran into in the elevator and was asking about overruns. The second is the female VP to whom my boss reports. And the third is a female VP that used to oversee the department in which I presently work. The SVP proceeds to ask me about the overruns. I explain as best as I can about the issues involved and also explain that I had prepared an email a few weeks ago about this. The VP whom I ran into in the elevator states that she never got that email on the cost overruns from me. I then explain that it would not come from me but would have come from my boss. The VP asks why I won't send it. I say that is not my place to send emails to VPs. Then the SVP stops everyone from talking and says, "What did you just say?" I then reiterate my response. Then the SVP begins questioning me about this point. After about 15 minutes of my explaining to them that I am not allowed to communicate with them per my boss orders, they are all pretty disgusted and frustrated. I further explain that this policy was created by my boss and has been consistently enforced by her for the past month or so. They tell me that they will have to come back to me on this, but in the meantime, they will get the emails about the overruns from my boss and follow up with her. Shit. So, I go back to my office that day and realize that my head is on the chopping block. I am really in a no-win situation and I just have to wait for it to play out. And play out it did. I come into work the next day, it's a Thursday, and I don't think anything has changed. Seems like a normal oppressive day and I am just waiting for the axe to fall on my head. I work most of the morning and then right before lunch, I get an email. The email is from the SVP with all the VPs copied in on it, that my boss is taking some time off and will be back in a few days. During her absence, all requests and management decisions will be made by the VP to whom my boss reports. I am not quite sure what this means, but given the weekend is coming up, I am just glad this friggin' week is almost over. Day goes by uneventful and around 4 p.m. the VP responsible for the department in which I work comes down and comes into my office and tells me that as of that day, my department and I am no longer reporting to my boss but I was now reporting directly to her. I ask what that means for the department and my job. She said nothing. It just means that the department will be better served under this new reporting structure given the increase in the amount of business that the department was engaged in since my hire, as well as the strategic internal leverage that would be needed going forward. I also was explicitly told that I was free to now communicate with any other VPs or SVPs of the organization as I saw fit. She then apologized for the experience I had with my boss and told me that she was unaware of my boss forbidding me to communicate with her or other VPs or SVPs. I take this all in, not knowing whom is telling the truth but relieved that I will no longer have to endure being treated like a child by my boss. I then ask about my boss and her reporting relationship to my department's other team members and was told that she was forbidden to execute orders to them on her own unless she has my prior approval. Karma. I stay at this company about 3 years total, have a great working relationship with the VP, whom was now my boss, as well as the other VPs and SVP to whom they reported. I only left when I got a better offer in a different industry. My former boss was eventually cancelled out, over a 3-month period, after HR investigated her behavior, interviewed me about the arbitrary rules about communicating with VPs that my boss had enforced on me, as well as her shouting at me and writing me up and disparaging me as a male. Talk about karma. Her write-up of me was used as evidence that she actually had implemented this no-contact policy solely with me, and because she wrote it up and put it in my employee file, it proved my veracity about the entire no-contact issue. In addition, and also compounding the problem, other alleged issues concerning cost overruns/financial reporting irregularities that she had hidden over the years. I have never seen her again, but if I ever do, I would love to be able to say to her, "Great seeing you again. I always tell people that you are the boss that taught me the importance of using email to further my career. TLDR, boss forbids me from emailing/communicating with upper management in an effort to ensure that she is the only one who gets credit for anything. Boss has a track record of bias against men and exhibits bias against me based on this same bias. This gets found out by upper management and then this leads to exposing my boss' attempt to hide her alleged financial malfeasance. Boss loses her job and I keep mine. Thank you." Next. I've been dating this girl for some time now, and our time together on weekdays are rather spontaneous and casual. After work, I'd call her to find out where she is and whether she had time for me. Then I'd go to her to spend time fooling around at her rental apartment, go for dinner together, grocery shopping, etc. There were never any complaints about this from her, until one day when we got into an argument about an unrelated matter. She accuses me of having no respect for her and her time, because I always call her at the last minute, and expect her to make time for me. She declares that I am causing her a lot of inconveniences because she can never make any plans on weekday evenings, since she doesn't know if I have time for her on any given weekday. Going forward, she's going to reject all plans that weren't made at least 24 hours in advance. She's a busy girl after all. I was shocked. This was never my intention. The nature of my work means that I have to do an unknown amount of overtime every day. What I've been doing is to call her at 6 PM when she gets off work, to give her an estimate of when I will finish, and when I can reach wherever she is. I can only get a reliable estimate at around 5 PM, when my bosses leave for home. What this means is that if I have to give her a 24-hour heads up, I can never make any weekday commitments. So I appeal to her, with the argument that she doesn't have to keep her weekday evenings free for me. She can go ahead and make her own plans, and just turn me down if she already has something else scheduled. She rejects that argument, because reasons. Now, my girlfriend is a foreigner, in my country on a work visa. She has no family and few friends here. As a result, she gets lonely, and wants to spend as much time together as possible. Under my previous method of meeting her spontaneously, I can be with her 4 weekdays every week on average. If I am required to give her a 24-hour advance notice, I can meet her nil weekdays every week. So that's exactly what I did. The day after, I made no plans with her. I let her know when I am off work, then told her I am going home. I didn't make plans with her for the next day either. I can tell she's pissed because she's giving very curt replies to my attempts at small talk, but I don't care. I went straight home, and gamed for the first time in 6 months. It was glorious. I used to be hardcore gamer, gaming at least 2 hours to 18 hours every day, but had to give it up because she required a lot of attention. This went on for a few days, until Saturday finally arrives. I paid for my act of defiance dearly that weekend, but she rescinded the stupid rule, and we were back to how we were before by the following week. TL. Doctor, girlfriend demands I give her a 24-hour advance notice when I make plans with her. Ends up cutting date nights from 6 days a week to only the weekends.